Hey guys. Tonight we start with something that might sound grim, but is oddly comforting in its distant, fog-shrouded way. You find yourself stepping onto a broad mosaic quayside in Constantinople, dawn's pale light leaking through layers of mist that curl around fallen amphorae, and the skeletal frames of late autumn fishing boats. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're getting settled, feel free to post your location local time down in the comments so we can all drift off in global synchronicity. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge over slick stones, your sandals echoing hollowly under a sky that looks more like the inside of a bruise than a morning horizon. Traders lash ropes around hulls, their muffled voices trembling with stories of sudden fevers and swellings in remote villages. The air tastes faintly of brine and something more unsettling, whispered dread. The capital of Justinian's empire, once teeming with color and clatter, is now hushed as if holding its breath. Historians still argue whether the Justinian Plague began here or at a distant port on Egypt's Nile Delta, but for you, all that matters is the sense of menace hovering in the chill dawn mists. As you ease forward, a lone merchant unclenches a fist of copper coins, tossing them onto a wooden table scarred with mildew. He's trading items, silk ribbons, carved ivory, and rumors. A mainstream historical fact, this city, around the year 541 of the Common Era, was home to over 500,000 people, making it one of the largest metropolises on Earth. Yet today, many houses stand silent, doors barred against the invisible threat within. A stray cat slips past you, its fur bristling as it darts into a narrow alley. You pause to watch a cluster of pigeons roosting on a broken column, ancient marble etched with faded gods. The birds puff their feathers against the damp air, almost mocking your human concerns. Then one flutters away as if sensing your presence. And you press on. Here's a quirky tidbit. At the height of the outbreak, some Constantinopolitans believed you could catch the sickness simply by wearing someone else's woolen cap. So they burned garments by the dozens in public bonfires, filling the sky with acrid, oddly fragrant smoke. You glance up at the great domed silhouette of Hagia Sophia, half hidden by rolling fog. The Emperor's new church, still faintly smelling of fresh mortar and burnt kiln fires, glows like a phantom citadel. Nearby, ragged soldiers stand watch at the city gates, lances resting on mud-caked shields. The city's once robust walls feel less protective now, as if even stone trembles at the mention of plague. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. If walls could talk, they'd probably sneeze. A woman steps from the shadows, offering you a cup of foul-smelling broth made from chickpeas and lentils. Better than nothing, she murmurs. You sip, tasting the earthy warmth and the faint metallic tang of copper cooking utensils. In that moment, the world seems to tilt slightly. Everyday survival has become an act of quiet courage. Yet the splendor of mosaics in nearby chapels still gleams through cracked windows, calling back to calmer days when processions of acolytes moved through scented incense clouds. Historians still argue whether those religious rituals actually halted the plague, or simply funneled more frightened people into crowded enclaves. You continue, boots clumping on a rampart overlooking the Golden Horn. Below, barges drift in near silent formation, their crews too weary or too wary to sing the old sea shanties. You imagine the harbor city buzzing with chariot wheels, hawkers shouting, performers balancing on copper-rimmed drums. Now, though, you only hear the drip of condensation from rotting timber, and your own slow breath, echoing against the masonry. Every so often, you catch a glimpse of a body bag, woven meshes tied shut, abandoned at the mouth of an alley, waiting for the next cart. You swallow against a sudden lump of pity and relief, realizing this distant calamity lacks the stench of modern industrial death. The plague here moves with a quiet, almost courteous whisper, giving you just enough time to note the color of the sky before it steals your strength. You press both hands onto the cold stone, drawing in the morning chill. Even as a light breeze lifts stray scraps of parchment, official edicts warning of gatherings larger than 5 households, you feel the strangeness of routine keep pulling you forward. A light joke. At least nobody expects you to show up at the forum looking your best. Loose cloak, tangled hair, tremors in your hands? Perfectly acceptable under the circumstances. In the near distance, you see the Emperor's palace, its gilded domes smeared with dew. The question hanging in the air feels as heavy as any plague sore. If an emperor can't stop the plague, what hope is left for the rest? And yet, as the rising sun fractures through mist into shards of gold, you sense resilience stirring, a promise that these silent streets may one day hum again with life. You follow the murmur of water, drawn toward the harbor where ships bob restlessly in their berths. The sails hang slack as if unsure whether to stay or flee. You pass workers hunched under thick cloaks, unloading bundles with ginger care, as though they might spill something worse than silk. Rats dart between crates, their slick fur catching the first fingers of sun. One pauses to sniff the air, nose twitching. You can't help but think, if these creatures knew what they were carrying, they'd probably unionize. The docks smell of damp rope, fermented dates, and something sharp and sour, a scent that clings to your nostrils like old guilt. Here, beneath the planks, plague floats in particles too small to see but large enough to reroute the course of history. These merchant ships, once symbols of ambition and imperial reach, have become ferryboats for misfortune. One mainstream historical fact: the Justinian Plague is now believed to have traveled with fleas aboard grain ships sailing from Egypt to Constantinople. Black rats, ratus to be precise, served as unwilling chauffeurs. Dock hands mutter behind you, their voices low and wary. No one wants to say the word plague aloud, as if that might grant it power. You overhear a superstition whispered between 2 brothers. One claims that sleeping with a clove of garlic under your tongue wards off the swelling. The other snorts. It might scare the fleas, or at least your wife. As you walk past a collapsed fish stall, your foot squelches in something both cold and unidentifiable. You look down and decide not to look too closely. The waters lapping at the harbor's edge carry debris from distant shores, papyrus scrolls, broken amphorae, even a child's sandal half covered in barnacles. All cast-offs from a world too busy fleeing death to tidy up after itself. Near the customs station, a group of scribes in dust-streaked robes record inventories. 50 sacks of barley, 12 amphorae of wine, 1 casket of fig preserves. And they pause, leaning over a suspiciously odoriferous bundle. Something that smells like regret. Their quills scratch across wax tablets, documenting commerce and calamity side by side. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some port officials, desperate to avoid infection, refused to touch cargo directly and developed early versions of tongs, paddles, and even wax gloves to examine goods from a distance. Whether it worked is unclear, but it certainly made for a strange sight. Grown men poking dried dates with sticks like suspicious mushrooms. You drift through rows of vessels, marveling at the carved prows still painted in fading colors, sea serpents, lions, gods of wind and harvest. There's something absurdly noble about it all, like someone showing up to a sinking ship with polished shoes and a lute. You overhear a sailor explaining to no one in particular that they've taken to naming the rats. That one's Julius. He's got the good sense to avoid the grain sacks. A nearby tavern, once a raucous hive of drunken song, now serves warm lentil mash and quiet stares. You take a bowl and sit by a smoky brazier, its warmth licking your face like an old dog too tired to bark. A woman across the table chews slowly, eyes unfocused. It came with the wheat, she says to no one in particular. The moment the crates came off the Alexandria ship, I felt it. Historians debate whether Alexandria or Pelusium was the actual point of origin for the outbreak, but what's certain is how fast it spread. The Mediterranean, once called Mare Nostrum, our sea, became a conveyor belt for sickness, from port to port, almost overnight. You sip your mash and stare at the map carved into the wall, red threads drawn between Rome, Carthage, Constantinople. Today, they feel more like blood vessels than trade lines. Behind the tavern, you find the body of a sailor laid out beneath a blanket, his boots still muddy from the Nile Delta. 2 candles flicker beside him. No priest, no prayer? Just the sea breeze and the faint scent of resin soap. You touch your fingers to your lips, then to his forehead, unsure why. Maybe respect. Maybe habit. Maybe both. A light joke crosses your mind. If shipping truly is the lifeblood of empire, then the rats have just become imperial messengers. You exit back into the light. The harbor bustles in strange silence. No shouting, no laughter, just the rhythmic creak of ships and the occasional sneeze. You pass a pile of burned crates. A sign reads, "Spoiled by Pharaoh's curse," in red chalk. The superstition is spreading faster than the symptoms. You feel an urge to scratch your wrist but resist. Paranoia itches too. A group of boys huddle around a crate, playing dice. Their laughter is forced, but real. You smile, warmed by their defiance. Even in Plague's shadow, children find a way to play. One rolls a perfect 6 and yells, "The gods favor me." Another mutters, "Tell that to your uncle's goat." You walk on. A rooster crows somewhere, absurdly late. Someone has painted a warning in tar across a warehouse wall. "Do not enter. The air is unwell." That phrase lingers with you as you leave the harbor, step by deliberate step, past the ships and the sea and the first line of plague carts pulled by horses wearing bells. You wonder if the bells are for the dead, or for the living. You step into the city again, where rumors and remedies now travel faster than cargo. You follow the uneven rhythm of hooves clacking over stone. A cart rumbles past you, its wheels squealing beneath the weight of something hidden beneath oilcloth. The driver, a lean man with a wide-brimmed hat and a sour expression, avoids your eyes. He mutters something about needing more lime pits and fewer philosophers. You step aside, letting the cart pass, and glance at the high arches of the imperial district ahead. The palace looms, all sharp angles and gold trim, as if trying to outshine the misery pooling in its shadow. Inside those gilded halls, the Emperor Justinian paces. You can't see him, of course, but you can imagine it, his ceremonial sandals tapping against tiled floors. His robe stitched with peacocks and power. This man, the bringer of law codes and cathedral domes, now stares down an invisible enemy. The court is a whispering huddle of advisors, courtiers, and spiritual counselors, most of whom seem to be suggesting either mass prayer or a swift exodus to the countryside. A mainstream historical fact: Justinian himself contracted the plague but survived, which must have been either divine providence or dumb luck. During his illness, the court teetered. Some whispered he was dead already. Others claimed he'd been replaced by a double, a waxy impostor propped on the throne to keep the empire from panicking. You imagine a sleepy court official lifting the dummy's arm to wave during a balcony appearance. "Long live the emperor," they mutter, as a bird poops on the marble. While Justinian recovers behind silk drapes and silver basins, his city is a tangle of uncertainty. Civil officials attempt to enforce curfews, but magistrates keep dying mid-decree. Messages from governors go unanswered, grain shipments vanish. Priests hold outdoor sermons attended by no one but cats. The emperor's great dream, the Renovatio Imperii, or restoration of the empire, feels increasingly like a fevered hallucination scrawled in a ledger no one will ever balance. You climb a steep hill, your legs aching as you pass shrines dedicated to various saints, some local, some imported from the far reaches of Christendom. A woman kneels before one, mumbling through tears. She holds a clay icon of Saint Blaise, the patron saint of throat ailments. She presses the icon to her lips, then to her heart. The statue's nose has been worn down by thousands of similar gestures. Whether it's divine power or accumulated thumb grease is up for debate. As you reach the Forum of Constantine, you find a curious tableau, a group of scholars in debate beneath a tattered awning. They argue about whether the plague is punishment, pestilence, or poor hygiene. One gestures at a diagram drawn in soot on a marble slab, claiming that imbalanced humors explain everything. Another insists the stars are misaligned. A third, clearly fed up, simply says maybe it's just bad luck and too many rats. You sit nearby and nibble a fig offered by a passing vendor. It's underripe, but sweet enough. As the scholars spiral into increasingly complex theories involving wind directions and goat temperaments, a fringe tidbit floats to mind. One group of astrologers in Constantinople believed that if you bathed in moonlight and held a silver coin under your tongue, you'd be immune. No records suggest it worked. But to be fair, silver has been worse investments. Through it all, Justinian writes. He orders decrees copied and dispatched. Regulations updated, judges reminded of their duties, even if their courts are empty. His imperial scribes work by lamplight, writing rules for a city that's forgotten how to follow them. New burial laws appear, limits on how many corpses may be interred in one tomb, how long a family must wait before reusing a grave, whether plague carts can cut through private property. Nothing says strong central government like regulating corpse logistics. A light joke crosses your mind. Nothing makes you appreciate bureaucracy like an unlicensed pile of skeletons in your neighbor's herb garden. Word spreads that Justinian wants to build a new granary, better insulated, safer from rats. Builders nod politely, then wander off. Half the architects have vanished. The other half are too busy digging their own sanitation ditches. You pass a group of engineers attempting to reinforce a crumbling aqueduct. One pauses to scratch his scalp and mumbles, maybe the emperor should build an ark instead. Despite it all, the imperial banner still flutters over the main gate. Gold on purple. Power pretending not to notice the smell. As evening falls, you wander toward a public bathhouse, once the pride of Roman hygiene, now eerily quiet. The water in the central pool is still. No gossiping matrons, no clapping children. Just silence. You dip your hand in. It's cold. Beside the changing rooms, someone has scrawled a message in soot. The plague bathes too. You consider chuckling but think better of it. As the lights fade from the sky, a procession of priests winds past the bathhouse. They chant softly, their torches flickering in the dusk. You watch as they disappear down a side street, their prayers merging with the hush of falling night. You imagine Justinian, still awake, his candle burning low, scratching a line onto parchment, and yet the city endures. You wake to the clatter of wooden shutters and the bray of a donkey protesting breakfast. Somewhere, a rooster crows with what sounds like misplaced confidence. He's several hours late. You sit up on your strong mattress, the musty smell of linen and lavender pouches hitting your nose. This is a merchant household, modest but proud, tucked between the Forum Bovis and a tangle of alleyways where cats conduct their mysterious nighttime business. Breakfast is thin barley porridge, lukewarm, a bit weevil-kissed, and accompanied by a single dried fig pretending to be a treat. Your host, a kindly woman with laugh lines and an iron poker near the hearth, insists on keeping the shutters open. So the air doesn't go foul, she mutters. This belief, that stagnant air breeds plague, is common, and not entirely wrong. People fan windows, hang garlands of rue and hyssop, and burn sandalwood to sweeten the breeze. You find it oddly charming, like a city trying to woo the gods with incense and good intentions. The streets are quieter than yesterday. Not empty, but cautious. Market stalls open later now, and most vendors wear cloths over their mouths, not for fashion, but for fear. You hear someone mutter, "The breath carries it," and remember another fringe remedy: stuffing your nose with spiced wool soaked in vinegar. Some people claim it works. Others just like the way it tickles. You pass a man hawking onions and rat traps. A bundle of both keeps the death away. He sings. You're not sure whether to be impressed or disturbed. Behind him, an herbalist arranges jars of rosemary, mint, and ground unicorn horn. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs and whispers, "It's powdered donkey tooth, but unicorns move inventory." A mainstream historical fact: many urban dwellers in Constantinople believed in miasma, bad air, as the plague's source. Doctors and healers carried pomander, scented balls, or long-nosed masks stuffed with herbs. It wasn't effective in a modern sense, but it kept them from fainting at the smell of decay. Which, honestly, is a win. You duck into a cobbler's shop, where a man is sewing a new pair of sandals. He looks up and offers a toothy grin. Business is slow, but at least no one wants to die barefoot. You chuckle and step around a row of half-finished boots. A small sign hangs above the door, closed on feast days and judgment days. The alleys are a different world. Children dart between clotheslines, their laughter cutting through the tension like birdsong. You overhear one girl explaining plague avoidance as if it's a game. Don't step on cracks, or sneeze at dogs, or eat round bread on Thursdays. Her friend nods solemnly. Children have their own logic, and in uncertain times, it's no less valid than a priest's. A woman peers from her window above, holding a cage of doves. They eat bad air, she calls down. Their lungs purify the house. You ask if it works. She shakes her head. No idea, but they're prettier than onions. A white feather flutters down and sticks to your sleeve. Around midday, you stumble upon a baker trying to knead dough while wearing gloves made from waxed linen. He glares at the sticky mess and mutters, "The saints can't save you from stupid ideas." Still, his oven smells like hope. You buy a half loaf, crusty and warm, and eat it in the shade of an empty fountain. The water has stopped flowing, diverted to serve more essential places: imperial kitchens, plague carts, the monastery boiling linens in a last-ditch effort to stay holy and hygienic. You wander further and notice small red marks painted on certain doorways. A fish, a cross, an M with a line through it. No one explains them. You get the feeling they mean different things to different people. Warning, mourning, protection, bureaucracy. Take your pick. A fringe tidbit: some families hung figs or lemons from their lintels to show they were still healthy, or perhaps to bribe fate with fruit. It's like leaving cookies out for the Grim Reaper and hoping he's more of a citrus guy. Down another alley, you find a group of laborers using vinegar to wash a well bucket. Stops the worm, one explains. Which worm? You ask. He shrugs. The plague worm, the belly worm, the gossip worm. Depends who you ask. The vinegar stings your nose, but the bucket shines. By now the sun has tilted westward. You return to the main avenue, where a group of nuns passes carrying baskets of bread, small scrolls, and something wrapped in linen. One peeks out, a loaf of honeyed bread shaped like a dove. For the sick, they say, and the scared. You follow them briefly, then pause. Their sandals are dust-covered, their steps rhythmic and soft. It feels like a procession of quiet defiance. You duck into a taverna just as the bells ring out, an evening call that now signals curfew. The place is dimly lit, filled with low murmurs and the clink of clay cups. You order something herbal and vaguely fermented, then slide into a corner. The drink tastes like thyme and wet coins, but it's oddly soothing. A man beside you explains that the innkeeper leaves out offerings of chickpeas and sweet wine for the household gods each night. Just in case they're still paying attention, he says. Gods get distracted, same as people. You nod, the candlelight dancing in your cup. Outside, a street singer plays a gentle tune on a two-string lyre. His song is mostly nonsense syllables now, the lyrics long forgotten, but the melody holds something ancient and steady, like a heartbeat wrapped in linen. You let it carry you, warm and drowsy, as the curfew takes hold and the city sighs beneath the stars. The moon hangs pale and low, casting soft blue light on the city's rooftops as you step outside. A breeze brushes your face, cool, faintly salty, and laced with the distant tang of smoke. Constantinople at night is not silent, exactly, but hushed. Footsteps echo more than they should, and you become aware of your own breathing. A dog barks once, somewhere far down by the sea walls. Then, nothing but the flutter of laundry caught in the rafters. You're on your way to the harbor districts, where goods once flowed like honey through the empire's veins. Now, those veins feel pinched and fragile. But there's still movement here, cautious, muffled, shifty. Lanterns bob down the stone walkways like fireflies with agendas. Dockworkers whisper, and sailors glance over their shoulders as if the air itself might be listening. Historians still argue whether trade accelerated the spread of the plague, or merely revealed how vulnerable the system already was. What is clear is this: Constantinople was an empire of imports, grain from Egypt, silk from China, spices from India, furs from the north, and every sack, barrel, and crate was a possible stowaway for fleas, rats, and something darker. You pass a warehouse half collapsed under its own roof. The mosaic tiles near the entry still shimmer, glass eyes set into golden halos, but no one prays here anymore. Inside, a man unpacks amphory with a cloth wrapped tightly over his nose and mouth. He looks up, sees you, and nods in weary solidarity. Everyone's a plague expert these days, after all. The bubonic plague is believed to have spread via fleas carried by black rats, which hitched rides on trade ships. The disease didn't respect borders, languages, or shipping routes. It simply followed the spice trails, the grain caravans, the arteries of ambition. You reach the edge of the Golden Horn, where boats rock gently in their moorings. Many are unmanned now, their sails limp, their ropes loosened like forgotten hair. A cat dozes atop a coil of hemp. Somewhere nearby, someone is humming a lullaby. A hymn? You can't tell. The sound rises, then falls again, swallowed by the lapping water. By the piers, a group of merchants is burning ledgers. The papers curl and blacken, tiny sparks leaping skyward like startled fireflies. One man sighs, better they burn than feed the plague. You wonder if he's being poetic or practical. Possibly both. A fringe tidbit: in one coastal village outside the city, a legend grew that the plague could be bribed. Families left food, candles, and coins outside their doors at dusk, sometimes with little notes reading, "We are poor, try the neighbors." It's unclear if it worked, but thieves likely made a tidy profit. Further down the quay, you meet a fisherman who swears the sea wards off sickness. He hasn't stepped inland in weeks. The gulls don't get sick, he argues, tossing a sardine skyward. A gull catches it, belches loudly, and flies away with disdain. Point made. You watch the fisherman mend his net. His fingers are fast but gentle, tying knots like he's weaving spells. The sea gives, he murmurs. The land takes. You nod, unsure whether that's wisdom or just waterfront poetry. Nearby, a small shrine to Poseidon has been reappropriated. A wooden cross now leans against the old altar, and beside it, someone has placed a loaf of barley bread and a tiny amphora of olive oil. The candle flickers stubbornly. You sense that it's not about who the offering is for, it's about not feeling powerless. And sometimes bread is the only prayer you have time to make. Back inland, past the seawall, you wind through neighborhoods once dense with laughter and lamp smoke. Now, shutters are nailed closed. Laundry lines hang limp and untouched. One household has posted a painted sign reading, "All clean here." Praise be. You hope they're right. In one small square, you spot a man painting a mural. He's barefoot and whistling. The picture is crude, a group of saints, each holding a broom, sweeping rats off a bridge. You smile despite yourself. "If art could cure," he says, seeing your face, "we'd be saved already." Then he returns to mixing ochre. You step around a fountain that still gurgles, despite its cracked lion heads and green-stained basin. A boy washes a wooden cross in the water, gently, like he's bathing a baby bird. His mother watches nearby, arms crossed but not unkind. As you pass, she offers a bit of stale bread. "You look tired," she says. "You are." You accept it with a nod. Historians still argue whether the response to the plague, burning incense, cutting off trade, praying in droves, helped or harmed. But from where you stand, watching a city try to maintain its rituals amid rot, it feels like a miracle that any of it worked at all. And perhaps that's the point. Back toward your borrowed bed, you see a young scribe lighting candles along the street. He hums as he works, careful and methodical. Each flame feels like defiance, a small, stubborn refusal to let fear win. You reach your door and pause. The moon has climbed higher, its light tracing the city's scars. Somewhere, a child cries, and somewhere else, a woman sings softly in Latin. The notes are unsteady but strong. You exhale, step inside, and close the door behind you. Dawn creeps in like a hesitant guest, brushing the horizon in soft pastels and pushing the night back into its corners. You stir before the bells ring, drawn from your palate by the scent of ash and sour wine, and maybe the quiet realization that sleep never lands too deep in these times. Outside, the sky is still the color of old parchment, and the streets glisten faintly, dew, or something less poetic. Today, you've agreed to help a monk from the monastery down the hill, one of the few still operating at full strength, albeit with fewer candles and more vinegar. He arrives with a wooden cart and a serious expression. "Laundry day," he says. You raise an eyebrow. "The city's laundry?" He nods, with the dry humor of a man who's heard that joke too many times. You follow him through a series of narrow streets, the cart squeaking in protest, until you reach the monastery gates. A fresco of St. Basil watches over you with peeling eyes. Inside, the air is thick with incense and boiling water. Monks shuffle silently, except for one who's humming a hymn very much off-key. "He's new," your companion mutters. Your job, it turns out, is stirring. Large vats of cloth, soaked in wine, vinegar, and herbs, bubble like the world's saddest stew. The cloth is mostly from nearby hospitals: tunics, bandages, the occasional pillowcase embroidered with a faded cross. The logic is simple: clean everything, and maybe the sickness won't stick. It's not much, but it's something to do besides wait. The Justinian Plague killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people across the Byzantine Empire and beyond. The emperor himself, Justinian I, contracted the disease and survived, though not without great cost to his body and, many would say, his empire's stamina. Constantinople was hit hardest between 541 and 542 CE, with reports of up to 10,000 deaths per day at its peak. As you stir, your monk friend recites a prayer, then switches to a folk rhyme about keeping mice out of linen. You join in by the second verse. It's surprisingly catchy, and the rhyme involves a weasel and an almond cake. Monastic life, you realize, is about rhythm. If the chants don't get you through the day, the chores will. A fringe tidbit: some monasteries train cats to deliver herbs between cells during outbreaks, using little satchels tied to their backs. The monks believed cats were less likely to carry the disease, or perhaps more expendable than friars. Either way, it's possibly history's strangest form of delivery service. You take a break in the courtyard, where vines have overtaken the statue of a forgotten saint. Birds pick seeds from the monastery's herb garden, and someone's laid out loaves to cool near the kitchen window. You snag a crust and chew thoughtfully. The bread is dry but flavored with rosemary and something else, maybe lavender? Keeps the gut sweet, says a passing nun. And the mood. Laundry complete, you and the monk head to the scriptorium, not for writing but disinfecting. Scrolls and codices are laid out on long tables, their pages separated by cloves and crushed mint. We lost 3 copyists last month, the monk says, his tone matter-of-fact. Now we let the books breathe. You gently flip a parchment page, the ink flaking like old bark. The text is in Greek, something about saints and livestock miracles. A goat flies by the second paragraph. You blink. Translation error, the monk assures you. Probably. You help seal scrolls in waxed linen, then watch as they're stored in high alcoves far from the damp. No one wants to bury knowledge with the bodies. Later, in the refectory, you share a meal of lentils, bread, and mulled water. The monks are quiet, but not unfriendly. One even tells a joke about a bishop, a mule, and a barrel of vinegar. You don't quite get it, but the table laughs anyway. The sound bounces off the stone walls like birds freed from a net. After lunch, you're given one last task, delivering bundles of clean cloth to a small women's hospice across the way. You balance the linen on your shoulder, careful not to crush the sprigs of mint woven into the ties. As you walk, the streets seem more forgiving, sun-warmed and hazy with dust. A woman passes you and nods. You've got the smell of monks, she says. Could be worse. The hospice is quiet, almost eerily so. Inside, women move like soft shadows, tending to patients with gentle hands and hushed voices. You leave the bundles by the door, bow slightly, and step back into the light. It takes a moment to adjust. Historians still argue whether religious institutions did more harm or good during plagues. Some monasteries hoarded supplies, others opened their doors and died serving. But from where you stand, watching a nun rub a girl's back while she coughs herself hoarse, there's no mistaking the intention. They tried. And trying, in a city half convinced it's been abandoned by God, feels revolutionary. On your way back to the merchant's house, you pause at a shaded well where a boy is fishing. Yes. Fishing for coins. People throw them in, he explains, so the water doesn't forget to be lucky. You ask if it works. Not yet, he shrugs, but I'm getting rich. You toss in a broken button. He nods like you've just paid for a wish. You return home as the bells ring for vespers, your skin scented faintly of herbs and warm cloth. The air feels different somehow, still heavy, still uncertain, but less hollow. Maybe it's the weight of linen. Maybe it's just a good day. You wake the next morning to the smell of wet stone and boiled onions, a surprisingly comforting combination. Your joints ache from yesterday's labor, but there's a strange satisfaction in soreness earned through something useful, especially when usefulness is in such short supply. Today, your host has asked you to assist with a task even less glamorous than laundry, caring for the city's dead. You dress slowly, aware of the weight in the air. Outside, the city is stirring. Low voices, cartwheels on cobbles, the rhythmic clang of something being repaired or dismantled. You make your way to the district near the old aqueduct, where the burial crews operate now. It's quieter here than anywhere else. But not silent. There's the steady thump of spades and the hush of whispered prayers. The man in charge of this crew is broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, and covered in enough waxed cloth to resemble a candle that's just walked out of church. We dig in pairs, he tells you, handing you a spade. Keeps the rhythm. Also, the rats don't like noise. The site is an old orchard, the trees now more skeletal than fruitful. Graves are shallow, practicality over piety, but neat. The city's cemeteries have long since overflowed, and the wealthy who can afford mausoleums aren't exactly advertising. The orchard, at least, offers shade. A mainstream historical fact in Constantinople during the height of the plague. The number of corpses overwhelmed the city's infrastructure. At one point, Emperor Justinian ordered bodies to be collected and loaded into ships that were then set adrift or sunk, an improvised solution that only made things worse when some of the ships washed back ashore. As you dig, the man beside you hums a folk tune. Keeps the heart light, he says, though his eyes are more tired than amused. Each grave is marked with a bit of chalk on a stone, the names, if known, scratched hastily. One says Sophia, another simply child. There's a rhythm to it. Dig, pause, lift, pat. Dig, pause, lift, pat. You try not to look too closely when the cart arrives. The dead are wrapped in linens, sometimes blankets, sometimes nothing at all. One man wears a boot on the wrong foot. You wonder if he was in a hurry or if the boot just wasn't his. A fringe tidbit: some families, unable to afford burial, created plague puppets, effigies of the deceased crafted from cloth and straw, which they buried instead. It was symbolic, sad, and eerily practical, allowing them to mourn while avoiding both the smell and the guilt. Around midday, a priest arrives. He's lost most of his voice, but still recites a blessing in Latin as each body is lowered. You don't understand every word, but you feel them, like distant waves crashing on a shoreline you've forgotten how to reach. He crosses himself with a shaky hand that offers you a bit of fig paste. For the nerves, he says. Lunch is shared beneath an olive tree. The fruit is underripe and sharp, but no one complains. There's bread soaked in oil and a little dried meat, which tastes like salt with ambition. The man beside you offers a sip of wine from a flask shaped like a fish. Don't ask, he says. It was my brother's. Later, you help a young woman carve names onto a board that will serve as a temporary ledger. She uses charcoal and speaks the names aloud as she writes. It helps them stay real. She explains. Her hands tremble, but her voice does not. One entry is for a midwife who delivered 17 babies in a single month before falling ill. Another is for a baker who gave away bread until he collapsed in his own doorway. He was crusty, she says with a smile, but kind. You nod. Crusty but kind is a move. As the day wears on, you notice something peculiar. People stop to watch. Not many, and not for long, but enough. Some leave flowers, faded mostly, but others just pause silently. A boy offers you a pebble, black and smooth. For luck, he says. You tuck it into your sleeve. You help carry one last body before the sun dips. A young man, face covered but hands oddly clean. You wonder what he did, what he dreamed of. If he had a cat. Maybe he hated cats. You'll never know, and somehow that makes him more real. Historians still argue whether burial rituals during plagues provided comfort or further trauma. But from your vantage, holding a stranger's weight while a priest murmurs over the soil, it seems clear. Ritual is the only thing separating loss from chaos. It gives death a shape, a container, a pause button. As dusk settles, the burial crew gathers around a small brazier. Someone brews tea made from dried citrus peel and mint. It's bitter but warming. A young gravedigger tells a joke about a skeleton trying to bribe Sharon with counterfeit coins. The punchline involves a paddle and poor exchange rates. You chuckle, more out of gratitude than amusement. You leave with sore arms and a deeper respect for the city's quiet machinery. The people who keep it from crumbling completely, one grave, one prayer, one peppermint tea at a time. On your way home, you pass a mural painted on a crumbling wall. It's fresh. A figure in robes, maybe a saint. Maybe a baker, holds a lantern toward a crowd of shadowy shapes. Someone has written beneath it in Greek, "Still, we light the way." You nod to yourself and step into the night. You sleep deeper that night, tucked under a wool blanket that still smells faintly of monastery herbs and boiled vinegar. No dreams, just warmth. Morning arrives with the clatter of hooves in the street and the chirp of birds confused by the sudden lack of human shouting. You stretch, wincing at sore shoulders, and begin your day with a small miracle. Someone has left you a boiled egg and a crust of fig bread on the windowsill. It's still warm. No note. A silent kindness. Today, you're sent to the port, what remains of it. Trade has slowed to a crawl, and though a few merchant ships still drift in, most of them carry more rats than goods, more rumors than comfort. Your task is to assist in sorting and repurposing abandoned cargo. You expect something dull, counting barrels or moving boxes, but what you find is far stranger. The quay is cluttered with all manner of items: amphorae of spoiled wine, bolts of damp silk, crates of garlic bulbs, and an alarming number of unlabeled jars. A port official, one sandal flapping loose and the other missing entirely, waves you over. Pick a crate, he grunts. See what's still worth keeping. And if it hisses, put it back. Your first crate holds wax tablets, most still usable, though some are scribbled with what appears to be shipping gossip. Magistrate owes 12 hens, one reads. Another says, tell Nico, not his baby. You raise an eyebrow. The port, it seems, has always known too much. A mainstream historical fact, Constantinople's port was one of the busiest in the ancient world, feeding not just its own people but many parts of the Eastern Roman Empire. During the plague, the city's maritime activity nearly halted, contributing to widespread shortages of grain, olive oil, and wine. Next crate, scrolls. Damp but legible. One is a treatise on aquatic birds, complete with illustrations that seem hopeful. Another is a half-finished shipping manifest with doodles of boats, with smiley faces. The plague may be terrifying, but someone had time for whimsy. Then there's a small wooden box, well carved, secured with twine. You untie it slowly, half expecting a snake. Instead, inside are dozens of little carved figurines, gods, animals, maybe a chess set if you squint. One piece looks like a lion sneezing. Souvenirs, the port official shrugs. From Egypt, or someone with too much time. You pocket a tiny owl, its wings shaped like quills. For wisdom, you say. Or insomnia. He replies. Later, you help catalog items for redistribution. A large shipment of ceramic mugs has been rebranded as medicine cups and sent off to apothecaries. A crate of beeswax, originally intended for luxury candles, is melted down to seal scrolls and waterproof sandals. Nothing is wasted now. Even a shipment of spoiled dates becomes fertilizer for a garden near the bathhouses. A fringe tidbit. During plague times, several coastal cities experimented with using smoke to disinfect arriving goods. In some cases, entire cargoes were briefly set on fire, not to destroy, but to purge the air. Unsurprisingly, this led to more fires than solutions. At noon, a small celebration erupts. A fishing boat returns with more than just old boots and disappointment. The catch includes eels, mussels, and 2 nearly intact crabs. You're handed a mussel stew in a chipped bowl. It's salty, smoky, and surprisingly decent. Fresh from the disease-free zone, jokes the cook. You assume he's referring to the sea. You spend the afternoon helping organize a new quarantine area, just a rope line around a pier, but it's better than nothing. Incoming sailors, weary-eyed and sun-darkened, are interviewed by a physician with a long stick and longer size. Most are cleared. One has a cough and is gently directed to a shaded bench with a flask of vinegar and a loaf of bread. Better safe than catastrophe, mutters the port clerk, scratching behind one ear with his tally stick. You overhear tales from afar. Alexandria is holding steady. Antioch is a mess. Rome is pretending not to notice. One sailor claims a distant island is entirely untouched, its people living on figs and seaweed and loud singing. You make a note to dream of that place tonight. Before you leave, you help a boy retrieve a lost amphora from the shallows. It's heavier than expected and contains not oil, but glass beads, emerald green, lapis blue, and a few the color of dried blood. We could trade these, he says. You nod. Or wear them and feel fancy. He grins, strings one around his wrist, and hands you another. You take it. It glows in the sun like a drop of sea. As you walk back through the port, you notice someone has drawn faces on the empty jars. Wide eyes, crooked smiles, and even one that looks a bit like Emperor Justinian himself, only with bigger ears. You pause. Are those real earrings? You pass a cat sunning itself on a broken statue's head. The cat sneezes, then resumes its nap. Bless you, you mutter, and for a moment, you believe the cat nods. The streets back home are busier than before, still quiet, still cautious, but alive. Someone is playing a lyre near the fountain. A girl is selling bundles of rosemary for luck. You buy one and tuck it behind your ear. Tomorrow may bring more digging, more stirring, more strange cargo. But for now, you carry a bead, a sprig of rosemary, and the faint memory of a lion-shaped chess piece. It's enough. You wake to rain. Not a downpour, but the kind of soft, pattering drizzle that makes roof tiles sing and pigeons grumble. The scent of damp stone and earth reaches your window, and despite everything, the plague, the fear, the funerals, it smells clean. Like something being reset. Your task today is different. You've been invited, or perhaps gently volunteered, to assist in one of the city's monasteries. Not for prayer, though you're welcome to join. No, they need help with an altogether humbler task, copying texts. You arrive through a narrow side gate, greeted by the scent of beeswax and parchment. The monk in charge is bald, beardless, and looks exactly like someone who has spent too much time squinting at Latin verbs. We're preserving what we can, he tells you, because the plague won't just take people. It tries to take memory, too. He leads you to a scriptorium, a small chamber with narrow windows, low stools, and several desks cluttered with scrolls, inks, and careful stacks of paper that smells faintly of vinegar and lavender. Disinfected, he explains, by smell and by prayer. Your first job, sort texts into 3 piles, valuable, damaged but salvageable, and hopeless. You're advised to read carefully. You'd be surprised what we find, says the monk. Last week, someone labeled a cookbook as a psalm. We prayed over roast duck for 20 minutes. The first scroll is medical, a guide to treating fever using crushed pearl and sheep bile. You grimace. Still better than leeches, says the monk, overhearing. A mainstream historical fact, monasteries during the Justinian Plague played a crucial role in preserving classical knowledge. Many scribes continued working in isolation, even while illness decimated their communities, producing copies of ancient texts that might have otherwise vanished forever. You copy a short passage from a Roman text on agriculture. It describes, in remarkable detail, the ideal way to prune grapevines, accompanied by what appears to be a philosophical tangent on patience. Pruning is like friendship, it reads, best done gently, and only after a full season. You take a break and explore the shelves. Some scrolls are crisp and clear, others are smudged, brittle, water-stained. One text appears to be a play, complete with character names, stage directions, and a surprisingly long monologue about socks. You blink. Tragedy of the lost footwear, the monk says with a grin. Popular in Alexandria. Don't ask. A fringe tidbit, some monks, fearing contamination, began copying texts using styluses made of bone instead of quill, believing the porous material somehow absorbed less illness. This did nothing to improve penmanship, but did create a short-lived fad for bone-based calligraphy tools. Mid-morning brings a tea break. The drink is bitter and dark, brewed with herbs and something that might be boiled bark. A young novice hands you a fig and a square of cheese. The fig's for pleasure, he says. The cheese is for calcium. Brother Lucian insists. Brother Lucian, a monk with a perpetually ink-streaked forehead, nods gravely nearby. You're invited to assist in illuminating a page, a slow, careful process involving gold leaf, powdered lapis, and what appears to be a squirrel hairbrush. Your attempt at a decorative initial B ends up looking more like a confused fish, but the monk pats your hand kindly. All beauty begins as awkwardness, he says, especially saints. Outside, the rain has slowed. Birds return to the trees, shaking droplets from their wings like tiny, grumpy laundry lines. You're given a new task: translate a short story from Greek to Latin. It's about a boy who learns to talk to bees. You are instantly invested. The story is oddly gentle. The boy learns to hum in their language, shares honey with forest spirits, and eventually convinces the bees to abandon a corrupt merchant and relocate to a temple. A moral, the monk says: be sweet, and you'll make friends. You nod, then quietly whisper to the scroll, or at least avoid being stung. As the day draws on, the scriptorium grows warmer. Candles flicker. The scratch of pens becomes a kind of lullaby. You lose yourself in the rhythm. Copy, pause, dip, scratch. It's hypnotic, calming, and strangely profound, like stitching ideas across centuries with thread made of ink and hope. By late afternoon, a new delivery arrives, salvaged scrolls from a noble house abandoned weeks ago. Among them is a diary, bound in cracked leather, with entries that span nearly 30 years. The last few pages are recent. The handwriting is shaky. Servants gone, one entry reads: I feed the birds. They still come. Another says, if I do not survive, let this be read. I lived well. I loved figs. You sit in silence after reading that. The monk gently takes the diary, wraps it in linen, and places it on a shelf marked Testimonia. We keep stories, he says, even the quiet ones. Historians still argue whether monasteries' efforts to copy texts were primarily devotional or practical. Some claim it was a spiritual duty, others a bureaucratic impulse. But as you ink the final letter of a page about ancient irrigation techniques, you realize it doesn't matter. Preservation is an act of defiance, of belief. You end the day with ink on your fingers, a warm fig in your hand, and a story about bees humming gently in your mind. Outside, the sun returns, casting long rays through the scriptorium windows like golden threads pulling time back together. On your walk home, you hum the bee-boy's melody, unsure if you've invented it or simply remembered it. The smell of rosemary still lingers in your hair, and the pebble from the burial ground rests heavy in your pocket. Memory, perhaps, is not just what we write, but what we carry. The next morning arrives with sunlight so gentle, it almost apologizes for showing up. You wake not to the usual coughs and calls from the street, but to silence. A rare, almost sacred kind in Constantinople these days. No bells, no shouting, just the coo of a pigeon cleaning its feathers outside your window. You stretch slowly, savoring the quiet. Today, you've been asked to help gather stories. Not things or food or corpses, stories. A local bishop has charged a few scribes and volunteers with collecting eyewitness accounts of the plague. To remember what this was, he says, so that one day, others might understand how we endured. You're paired with a woman named Helena. She's older than you by at least 2 decades and walks with a slight limp. But she carries a satchel of scrolls, charcoal sticks, and a look that says she's already seen too much to be rattled by what's coming next. Let's go find some old ghosts, she says, tugging her hood tight. You begin in the pottery district. It's mostly shuttered now, but one kiln still burns faintly. The potter, A wiry man with soot permanently etched into his knuckles agrees to talk while shaping a new jar. His wife died 2 weeks ago. She liked the way the clay cracked when it dried, he says. Said it reminded her of tree bark. He shows you a cup she made with tiny ridges along the rim. For grip, he explains. She said I dropped things too much. His laugh is rough, but not bitter. You make notes. Helena sketches the kiln, the cup, his hands. The shape of morning, she whispers. A mainstream historical fact. The Justinian Plague claimed millions of lives, but also gave rise to an early form of epidemiological observation. People began recording symptoms, timelines, and social effects, planting the seeds for future public health records. Next, a baker. She's kneading dough with a rhythm that seems older than the empire itself. Her daughter watches silently from the doorway, holding a wooden spoon like a scepter. The bread keeps rising, the woman says, even when no one's left to eat it. You ask what she remembers most. She doesn't hesitate. The quiet, she says. The first morning the market didn't open. Even the pigeons noticed. A fringe tidbit. In some neighborhoods, children created plague songs to mark time and remember which houses had sick residents. The melodies were simple, repetitive, and oddly cheerful. One line, roughly translated, went, "Don't knock on the red door, unless you like vinegar." Helena hums that tune absent-mindedly as you walk to the next house. It's on the edge of the old forum, where the marble still gleams under decades of soot and moss. Here, you speak with a woman who kept tending the public baths long after patrons stopped coming. I boiled the water anyway, she says. Felt wrong to let it grow still. She leads you to the baths, cold now, empty, and shows you where the water used to echo off the domes. You swear you can still hear it. There are no patrons, but one cat has claimed the changing bench as a throne. It blinks at you, completely unimpressed. You sit for a while under the high arches. Helena draws. You close your eyes and imagine a time when laughter bounced off these walls, when steam clung to every surface, when gossip flowed thicker than the water. The woman sighs. I keep the doors open, she tells you. Sometimes the wind needs to pass through. Outside, you pass by a mural faded with time. Someone has scrawled words beneath it in charcoal. We're still here. Helena smiles. There's your title, she says. Historians still argue whether these first-person accounts were truly representative or shaped by fear, memory, and the pressures of survival. But sitting there, watching a potter cry over his wife's mug, or hearing a baker remember silence louder than bells, it's hard to think of these stories as anything but truth. You and Helena finish your rounds by sunset. You've spoken with a midwife, who saved more babies than she buried. With a shepherd's son, now a candlemaker, who still listens for sheep bells in his sleep. With a former actor who lost his audience but performs soliloquies to pigeons. They're loyal, he says, and rarely heckle. You gather these voices like treasure. Each story a spark in the long, dim corridor of history. Nothing grand. Nothing heroic. Just people, enduring, grieving, laughing too soon, and crying when it's too late. That night you transcribe by candlelight. Helena works beside you, occasionally chewing her quill. We're not writing history, she says. We're writing the footnotes to someone else's. You add a line to the baker's story, the bread still rose. Another to the bathhouse keepers, the wind-needed passage. And for the potter's wife, she liked the way the clay cracked. Outside, the city breeze, still wounded, still frightened, but breathing, and somewhere, a pigeon lands on a windowsill, stretches its wings, and falls asleep. You wake to thunder, not loud, not alarming, but the kind that rolls like a slow drumbeat through the city's stone bones. Rain spatters the tiles above your head. It's cool, for once, and the scent of wet fig leaves drifts through the shutters. Today's task is one you didn't expect. You've been asked to assist in preparing a procession, not a triumphant one, not a military parade, but something quieter. A procession of hope, perhaps, or one of collective exhale. The clergy have decided that, despite the risks, the city needs a ritual to remind itself that it is still, stubbornly, alive. You meet the others outside a crumbling basilica. The walls are scorched from past fires, patched with mismatched stone. But the bells still work, mostly. They clang like someone knocking on a bronze pot, but it's enough to draw people from doorways and thresholds. A priest in a soot-dusted robe hands you a carved wooden rod topped with a small bronze leaf. Symbol of renewal, he says. Or maybe just decoration. The records are unclear. He winks. Your job? Walk. Quietly. Hold the rod upright. Look serene. You and dozens of others begin the slow procession through the forum. No grand speeches, no trumpets. Just the rhythmic shush of feet on wet cobblestone, and the occasional cough swallowed by the rain. People emerge from windows to watch. Some join, barefoot and cautious. Children try to match their parents' solemn pace but occasionally break into skipping when they think no one's looking. A mainstream historical fact, public processions during plagues were often intended to invoke divine mercy. But they also served a social purpose, rekindling communal bonds in times of extreme isolation and reminding citizens that they were not suffering alone. The procession winds past shuttered bathhouses, silent market stalls, and statues green with age. You pass the site where you once helped bury a stranger. The white pebble you left is still there. A dog is sniffing it. As you round a corner, you hear a faint chant, a handful of monks singing something low in Latin. The words are old, the melody older. It's not joyful, but it's not despairing either. It floats like incense through the damp air, binding the crowd in a kind of hush. A fringe tidbit. In some parts of the empire, processions were forbidden during plagues, thought to stir the air and spread illness. In Constantinople, however, the emperor often allowed them, believing public prayer to be a shield stronger than fear. You reach the hippodrome, not for games, of course. The stands are empty, the stalls long closed. But the open space allows the procession to fan out. You see people bowing their heads, not always in prayer, sometimes just in relief. Some kneel. One man sets down a loaf of bread on the steps, a silent offering. A child places a daisy in the hand of a statue. The priest steps forward and speaks, not loudly, not with fire or fury, but with a gentle cadence that fits the rain. We are still here, he says. We remember. We mourn. We wait. And still we live. You notice an elderly woman nearby whispering something. You lean in. He used to bring me walnuts, she says. My husband. Every Friday. She clutches a walnut in her palm like a relic. I still carry them, just in case he comes back. The procession disperses slowly. Some linger. Others leave in silence. You walk the long way home, rod still in hand, not quite ready to let go of its weight. Historians still argue whether such rituals had any real impact. Some say they provided false hope, others that they prevented riots. But you can't help feeling that today, the act of walking, of being seen, was itself a kind of resistance. Back at your apartment, you lay the rod beside your door. It drips gently onto the stone. You light a candle and think about the chant. The way it wove through the rain like thread through fabric. The way the city moved together, just for a while, like a single sleeping creature shifting under a heavy blanket. Before bed, you crack open your window. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing, softly, tunelessly, like a lullaby meant only for the pigeons and the night wind. You smile. Sleep comes easier that evening. As if the city, tired of its silence, has finally decided to sing you to sleep. The morning light slips through narrow windows in your modest room, casting thin rectangles across the rough wooden floor. The air carries the faint scent of damp linen and fresh bread baking somewhere down the street. You stretch and prepare yourself for a day unlike the others. Today, you will glimpse how medicine itself wrestled with the mystery of the plague. You are led to a small courtyard behind a clinic run by a physician named Rufinus. His beard is long and patchy, his eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. He wears a leather apron speckled with stains you prefer not to identify. He greets you with a nod and a tired smile. "We are all learning," he says, "but the plague teaches harsh lessons." Inside, the clinic smells of herbs and dried flowers, of smoke from a low fire meant to purify the air. Shelves hold jars filled with concoctions that look like they belong in a wizard's cabinet rather than a healer's. There's rue, myrrh, and something Rufinus calls dragon's blood, which is actually a deep red resin from a tree far away. Your first task is simple: prepare poultices. You mash herbs between smooth stones, mixing in vinegar and honey. Rufinus explains that honey not only soothes wounds but also traps some of the harmful particles. Honey is nature's bandage, he says, though I wish it worked better on the plague. A mainstream historical fact: physicians during the Justinian Plague often relied on a combination of traditional herbal remedies and philosophical reasoning. As medical science was still in its infancy and knowledge about infectious diseases was limited, you watch Rufinus as he carefully inspects a patient, a young man whose cheeks have taken on the faint purple blotches ominous in their calmness. The man coughs, eyes dull but steady. The black spots are like warnings, Rufinus murmurs. The body's last effort. You help apply the poultice, feeling the cool paste against your fingers. It is oddly comforting, like a silent promise that someone cares. Rufinus talks about the air miasma, the poisonous vapors believed to carry disease. He wears a mask stuffed with fragrant herbs, lavender, mint, cloves, to filter the air. The mask's beak-like shape looks more fitting for a theatrical mask than a doctor's tool, but it is an early form of protection. A fringe tidbit: some physicians believed that the plague was punishment for humanity's sins, while others thought it was caused by bad air trapped by celestial alignments. Rufinus is somewhere in between, cautiously hopeful but wary of both extremes. You are shown a strange device, a glass vial filled with water and a thin piece of lead. It's said to predict the patient's fate by the way the lead sinks or floats. You watch, fascinated and skeptical. Rufinus shrugs. It is better than guessing. The clinic is not a place of miracles. Many patients come, fewer leave. But the atmosphere is quietly determined. Rufinus shares stories of previous outbreaks, how physicians and healers had struggled before the plague reached this city. We stand on the shoulders of those who failed better, he says. You assist with cleaning bandages, washing linens in large basins. The water quickly turns dark. You notice a faint hum outside, a chanting from a nearby chapel. Somehow, the blend of ritual and science here doesn't feel contradictory. It feels like humanity's desperate grasp for hope. As the sun sets, Rufinus shows you a recipe for a sleeping draught, used to calm fevered patients. The ingredients are simple but effective: poppy, wine, and a pinch of rosemary. You sip a small taste, bitter, earthy, with a faint sweetness. You feel your eyelids grow heavy almost immediately. Historians still argue whether such remedies genuinely alleviated symptoms or merely eased the mind. But in a time when understanding was limited, the comfort of sleep might have been the best medicine of all. That night, you dream of gardens, lush and fragrant, filled with herbs you now recognize. The air is cool and still, the buzz of bees soft and distant. In your dream, you walk barefoot on mossy paths, feeling the earth steady beneath your feet, steady as the knowledge slowly growing within you. You awaken with a start, the taste of honey lingering on your tongue, and the quiet hope that even in the darkest moments, healing finds a way. You awake to a city cloaked in early morning mist, the sky a soft gray that blurs the outlines of rooftops and minarets alike. The streets are quiet, save for the occasional clip-clop of a horse's hooves echoing distantly. Today, you are invited to witness how the common people, those often overlooked, carried on with their daily lives despite the shadow of the plague. Your first stop is a humble household where a seamstress named Eudocia works. She sits by a small wooden table covered with scraps of fabric in faded blues and reds, her fingers moving deftly as she sews. Her home smells faintly of lavender and worn leather. Eudocia explains that the plague has altered her patterns of work and trade, but not her need to create. The city may tremble, she says softly, but life still needs clothing. We mend what we have, make do with what we find. You watch as she repairs a child's tunic, threading a needle with practiced ease. She talks about the challenges of acquiring materials, the disruption of trade routes, and how the closure of markets has made even simple cloth a rare commodity. A mainstream historical fact, the Justinian Plague disrupted trade across the Mediterranean, causing shortages of goods and raw materials, which in turn forced artisans to adapt with creativity and resourcefulness. Next, you accompany Eudocia to the local fountain, where women gather water daily. Despite the risks, the fountain remains the center of social life. Here, gossip flows as freely as the water, news of lost neighbors, of hopeful recoveries, and of curious phenomena like strange lights seen at dusk. You meet a young boy who tells you about his secret hiding place in the olive groves, where he plays to escape the gloom of the city. He shares stories of his adventures, imaginary battles, secret messages carved into bark, and a family of rabbits he's convinced is watching over him. A fringe tidbit: in some communities, children develop secret codes and games to maintain normalcy and hope during plague outbreaks, a quiet rebellion against despair. You then visit a humble bakery where bread is baked over open fires. The baker, a jovial man with flour-dusted hands, tells you how the plague has changed baking schedules. We bake more at night now, he chuckles, when the city sleeps and the ghosts don't mind the smell of fresh bread. The aroma of baking bread is comforting, a small anchor in uncertain times. You try a warm loaf, its crust crackling softly beneath your fingers. Historians still argue whether daily life during the plague was more dominated by fear or by these quiet acts of resilience. But seeing these moments, the seamstress stitching, the children playing, the baker laughing, makes it clear that humanity's spirit often flickers brightest in the darkest hours. As you walk through the mist-shrouded streets, you notice small acts of kindness: a bundle of herbs left at a doorstep, a basket of figs offered to a neighbor, a stray dog cared for by children. The city's pulse may have slowed, but it has not stopped. You end your day by sitting beneath an ancient olive tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like tired arms. You close your eyes and listen to the distant call to prayer, the rustle of leaves, and the soft murmur of life, stubborn and steady. Sleep finds you gently tonight, wrapped in the quiet hum of a city that refuses to give in. The sun sets slowly, painting the sky in shades of dusty pink and muted gold as you find yourself walking along the edge of the harbor. Ships lie silent, their sails furled, bobbing gently against the wooden piers. The air smells of salt, seaweed, and old rope. Here, far from the bustling center, you glimpse the lifeblood of the empire, the trade routes and the merchants who once thrived on them. Today, you are invited to explore how the Justinian Plague disrupted commerce and altered the flow of goods from distant lands. The once busy harbor, where the clamor of traders haggling over spices and silk used to fill the air, is now eerily quiet. Crates marked with exotic symbols sit unopened, their contents a mystery waiting to be rediscovered. You speak with an aging merchant named Damascus who remembers the days before the plague. His hands are calloused from years of handling goods, and his voice carries the weight of lost fortunes and interrupted journeys. The ships stopped coming, he says with a sigh. The silk routes dried up like a river in summer. You learn how the disruption of these trade networks meant more than just economic loss. It meant that cities farther afield, dependent on luxury goods or essential supplies, faced shortages and hardship. The world's interconnectedness, so taken for granted, suddenly felt fragile and vulnerable. A mainstream historical fact, the Justinian Plague is often credited with accelerating the decline of the Eastern Roman Empire, partly because it severed crucial trade routes and depleted urban populations. As you stroll the docks, you notice fishermen casting nets into the gray water, their labor unchanged by the plague. Their quiet determination contrasts with the emptiness of the merchant warehouses. You imagine their lives as a fragile thread keeping the city connected to nature's rhythms. A fringe tidbit: some scholars speculate that the economic disruptions caused by the plague may have inadvertently helped preserve local crafts and traditions by forcing communities to rely more on themselves rather than distant imports. The conversation with Damascus drifts to rumors of lost cities and forgotten ports, swallowed by time and sand as trade routes shifted. You picture these places as ghostly echoes beneath shifting dunes, harboring secrets no one alive can recall. The evening deepens. Lanterns flicker on boats, casting trembling reflections on the water. You sit on the weathered stone quay, the coolness seeping through your cloak, and listen to the soft slap of waves against the hulls. The world feels vast and still. As night falls, you reflect on the delicate balance between connection and isolation. How a tiny organism traveling unseen could ripple through continents, altering lives in ways both visible and subtle. The harbor's silence is not just an end but also a pause, a moment for the world to catch its breath. You close your eyes and let the steady rhythm of the sea and the gentle lapping of water carry you toward sleep, feeling the timelessness of the waves beneath a sky full of distant stars. You step through an arched gateway into a courtyard planted with young olive trees, their silvery leaves whispering in the breeze like soft laughter. The air here feels lighter, as though centuries of sorrow have finally begun to settle into the soil. This place is the city's newest infirmary courtyard, a modern tribute to those who endured the plague and to the lessons drawn from its silent march through history. Here, visitors pause at bronze plaques etched with names: physicians, scribes, gravediggers, merchants, seamstresses, and children. You trace your fingers over the letters, feeling a connection across time. A mainstream historical fact, the Justinian Plague prompted the first known systematic record-keeping of epidemic deaths, influencing later public health efforts in medieval Europe and beyond. Those early ledgers in Constantinople laid the groundwork for modern epidemiology, even if their methods were rudimentary compared to today's standards. You wander past a display of replica plague masks, each slightly different, some stuffed with rose petals, others with crushed mint. You remember Rufinus's clinic and the beet barrier that smelled of hope as much as of herbs. A quirky tidbit: a recent excavation uncovered a mask variant in Anatolia adorned with tiny carvings of fleas crossed out, suggesting an early attempt at further on. You find a glass case holding clay figures shaped like the dancers in the ancient mimes you once glimpsed in theater ruins. These were discovered in a tiny workshop in the city's back alleys, thought to be children's plague puppets, effigies they buried instead of real corpses. The delight in their simplicity is tinged with tragedy, a reminder that even in grief, humanity seeks ritual and closure. Branding anti-plague gear with no flea guarantees. Further on, you find a glass case holding clay figures shaped like the dancers in the ancient mimes you once glimpsed in theater ruins. These were discovered in a tiny workshop in the city's back alleys, thought to be children's plague puppets, effigies they buried instead of real corpses. The delight in their simplicity is tinged with tragedy, a reminder that even in grief, humanity seeks ritual and closure. You pause at a timeline etched into stone. It begins in 541 CE with the first recorded death and arcs through centuries of pandemics, quarantines, triumphs, and follies. At the edge, the timeline leaves room for your story. You press your palm against the cool granite, sharing your presence with an endless procession of voices. At the courtyard's center stands a statue of a cloaked figure holding a lantern high, pathfinder of both literal and metaphorical darkness. A scholar in crisp robes stands beside it, explaining to a small group how the lessons from Justinian's time, quarantine measures, record keeping, public communication, echo in our own outbreak responses. Historians still argue whether the parallels are direct or coincidental, she notes. But the human instinct to document and divide the sick from the healthy remains a constant. You lean in to hear the debate more closely. Was it divine guidance, emerging scientific thought, or sheer desperation that drove early Byzantine leaders to isolate neighborhoods and record names? The answer is murky. What's clear is that those actions shaped later practices, influencing port quarantines in Venice, plague hospitals in Milan, and even the word quarantine itself, derived from the Italian quarantina, the 40-day isolation period inspired by Byzantine precedents. Before you leave, you wander through a small herb garden planted in the courtyard's corner. Lavender, rue, and hyssop grow in neat rows. A sign reads, "Hope grows where memory is planted." You close your eyes and inhale the familiar scents, recalling hours spent crushing those same herbs between stone slabs centuries ago. The garden hums with bees, a soft, reassuring buzz that feels like continuity rather than intrusion. You step back through the gateway into sunlight once more. The city beyond is alive in a way it hasn't been for generations. Children play in winding alleys, vendors shout gentle greetings, and church bells ring midday. You breathe deeply, aware that the past and present blend in every stone. Every story, every ritual. As you walk away, you carry with you the echoes of recovery, the pleas of survivors, the defiance of those who lit candles in dark times, the scribes who wrote names so they would not be forgotten. These echoes shape your footsteps now, guiding you toward tomorrow with the promise that history's shadows need not drown our light. Slowly now, you pause at the threshold of remembrance and reality. Each breath lengthens and softens, carrying away the weight of centuries and settling you into gentle twilight. Feel the hush in your chest, the soft flutter of olive leaves overhead whispering lullabies. Here, time feels stretched, each moment a quiet wave lapping at the shore of your consciousness. Imagine the lantern held high, its flames small but unwavering against night's gathering. You walk beside it, step by step, as its warmth spreads across the stones around you. There is no rush. The world's edges blur, the distant city hum fades into the hush of your own breath, timeless and serene. Let the scent of lavender and hyssop trail behind you, as comforting as a mother's shawl. Remember the monk's chants, the echo of footsteps on ancient cobblestone, the soft drip of healing poultices in candlelit rooms. Each memory rests lightly, like dew on petals, glistening with hope. Your heart slows to match the rhythm of bees in that courtyard garden, their soft buzz a reminder that life persists, gentle and steady. The sky above shifts from dusk to deep indigo, stars stirring to witness your peace. No urgency remains, only the soft promise of rest. Now, as you close your eyes, imagine the olive trees bending in farewell, their leaves a shimmer of silver. You walk away from the courtyard, yet its echoes stay with you, adding warmth to your dreams, guiding you toward dawn's promise. In this gentle whisper of history and humanity, find your calm, sleep well. Sweet dreams.